Hey guys, welcome back to my second video. I'm sorry it's coming out later than I wanted it to, but that's because I got COVID and so things got seriously delayed. But anyway, I wanted to talk about mental health today and specifically what it's like or what it might be like for somebody to try and talk about their mental health with their parents. So I guess as a bit of a disclaimer, I actually initially wanted this video title to be what it's like talking about your mental health to your Asian family. But then I was really worried that the Asian community already gets so many stereotypes and prejudices thrown at them, and I didn't want this to be another contributor to that. And plus, it's not like the experiences that I'm going to talk about today are completely universal in the Asian community or anywhere. So I guess just think about this video as some of the struggles anybody might experience trying to talk about their mental health with their parents or their family, whoever that may be. So I went on Instagram and I asked some of you guys what it's like for you guys to try to talk about your mental well-being with your family, and I got a lot of responses that basically said not great. I think the experience has just been collectively a struggle for many of us. But before I get into that, I thought I should first start with talking about my own journey and my own experience with mental health. Since we're all sharing, I thought I would tell my personal stories to you. Great. And then go on to talk about how I've tried to speak with my family about it. So first of all, I would start with going back to 2020. COVID pandemic lockdown. I think that was the first time I noticed my mental health started taking a real dip. Before that, it's not like I had never struggled with anything before, but the lockdown was the first time I'd experienced really kind of what I deemed to be serious issues, I don't know if you would call it insomnia, but I had really, really bad sleeping habits. I was sleeping at 7 a.m. sometimes. That was the first period of my life when I had ever experienced anxiety attacks, which I didn't even know. I didn't even know it was an anxiety attack the first time I had one. And just, yeah, a general nagging anxiety at the back of my head that looking back I couldn't completely fathom in the moment, but now I've it's been 2 years now and I've learned a lot more about myself since then. I can now identify and say, yeah, that was anxiety and I had a lot of it. So I think for many people the lockdown was this hugely harmful period for their mental health, just losing everything about your life and the way it was, and then the concerns about health and safety for yourself, for your friends and family. It was not a fun time. For me personally, I was really, really lucky that nobody I cared about or loved was seriously affected by this issue. So the hardest thing for me at the time was losing my sense of self and purpose. I would consider myself to be a very, very active, busy, extroverted person. I had just finished my second year of university. I was completely involved in so many extracurricular activities. I was in the middle of directing a show, and I was also really involved in netball, and I was playing for a couple of social teams, and then there were a bunch of social activities surrounding those things. So a typical day in my week, a typical week in my life was seriously busy. And so when you strip that all away and you put someone like that into a lockdown period, that sudden change was incredibly drastic. So going from that completely busy life to having almost nothing to do at all was seriously a change to be reckoned with, and I did not necessarily deal with that, and I did not deal with that very well. The hardest thing of all was basically feeling every day I should be doing something more than I currently was. I felt like I had to, even with no opportunities in my day to do much, I felt like I still had to be that person that I was before the lockdown. I felt like I had to be achieving things and creating things and contributing things to people, and I had to, do all these productive things when just kind of staying alive is actually a very productive thing to be doing, that I now know. And that was really hard on me, and I think that was the main reason for my anxiety. And basically, yeah, like I mentioned, I just started having extremely bad sleep habits. Something called revenge sleep procrastination, if you guys know what that is. It's like when you don't think your day is productive enough and you stay awake really late at night trying to like have enough fun or like do enough stuff so that you feel satisfied before you sleep. I did so much of that. I was gaming a lot. I was just on my phone on TikTok constantly at night trying to get a sense of like enjoyment or fulfillment that I just wasn't having during my daytime. And yeah, I would end up sleeping really, really late, 6 a.m., sometimes 7, and it just ruined my sleep schedule. And then the whole cycle would repeat the next day when I felt like lethargic, and it was just a really, really toxic cycle. And then come my anxiety, I remember feeling, and thankfully I don't really feel this way so much anymore now, but I remember feeling like I just never had any time for anything. And I was listening to a podcast last night actually that talked about this. I think it's called Hurry Sickness, is what this podcast called it. And it's basically feeling like just in a day, everything is rushing by really, really quickly. And for somebody who had all the time in the world to do like anything, you know, within the confines of my room, for somebody who had a lot of time in a day, I felt like I had no time at all. I felt like every hour flew by, and that made me panic, and I would just feel like, oh my god, I'm not doing enough, even though there wasn't anything to do. Like, what was I supposed to do? So that was my life for a bit. And then come my first anxiety attack. That was really interesting. I had no idea that was what I was experiencing when I was experiencing it. It basically felt like, you know, my chest was really heavy, and I felt like this impending sense of doom at the back of my mind, like something really, really bad was gonna happen, even though like nothing was going on that day. I was just literally at home, and I just couldn't shake the feeling like something was gonna happen. There was also a physical sensation. My chest felt like it was constricting, and it wasn't impossible to breathe, but it was definitely a bit difficult. And yeah, I didn't realize I was having something was happening to me until it was over, and I was like, whoa, that was not normal. So that was the first time I realized that, okay, I think something's wrong with me. Long story short, I have since gotten a lot of help for my anxiety. I've tried out like counselors, CBT, self-therapy, journaling. I've talked to my friends a lot more about it. I've engaged with a lot more resources online about it, so I'm in a much better place. Like, I know how to handle things a lot better now. But at the time, it was really difficult. And one of the most unhelpful things about that mindset was probably that I felt like I was broken. And it feels kind of cringe saying it now, but that's definitely how I felt back then. Like, oh my god, I have anxiety, I have like a mental disorder, I have a mental illness. Like, you grow up and you see so many people talking about their mental health on social media, and it's like, oh yeah, that's fine, that's normal, it's completely acceptable. But not for me. Like, once it happens to me, and once it happened to me, I was like, oh my god, this is unacceptable. And I really, really kind of hated that I had it. I felt like I failed myself for having it, and that was just, it just made things worse, basically. It wasn't helpful. Anyway, the point being, when I started to get help, I started to talk to my family a little bit about it. Now, it doesn't start off that bad at all, actually. My family was really supportive of it. Like, my parents have never been against things like therapy. You know, they have done their best to understand that, you know, if we have a problem, then, you know, we should go do something about it. The difficulty with mental health and trying to talk about it with my family is it usually comes from a lack of understanding on their part, because most people in my family are not super educated or aware about what mental health issues look like, let alone like what solutions might look like. So my struggles with my family tend to be surrounding me trying to talk about mental health as a whole and not necessarily my problems. When I try to talk about mental health in my family, the problem is more so their attitude towards mental health. Like, they don't, and I'm sure a lot of families say this, but they'll say things like, oh, make sure you don't tell other people what's going on, or like, you know, make sure you don't share too much with others. And here I am like outing myself in public, but that's not what they mean. I think what most families mean when they say that is they're really worried about like privacy, and they, you know, they want to like protect their dignity and like social respectability as like people in society. But the problem with keeping conversations about mental health like all hush hush is that it just furthers and deepens the stigma against mental health issues, which might lead to people having conclusions like I did that, oh my god, if it's something to be ashamed about, then, you know, like I'm not supposed to have it. And that just seriously limits how much better a person can get with their mental health issues if there's like so much shame surrounding it. And it's definitely an unhealthy take. And I've tried to talk to my family about it, and I've tried to talk to my family about their mental health. So I recently took an online counseling skills course. I am now certified in counseling skills, and I learned so much about like how to recognize, you know, people's blind spots being like the things about themselves that they don't themselves realize. And I feel like I just see so much more of, you know, my family's struggles. Like I'm able to understand their problems a lot better. So every time I try to bring up like, oh hey, you know, why don't we talk about this, why don't we do something about this, it's often met with a lot of like stubbornness. They find it really difficult, I guess, to embrace some of the ideas surrounding mental health. And that just kind of makes it stressful for everybody, you know, like everyone's insisting that there's no problem, but there kind of clearly is a problem. And that can be really frustrating. So going back to Instagram, so I asked, what is it like trying to talk to your family about mental health, your mental health? And so, for example, like talking to a brick wall, or like trying to convince non-believers that God exists, or like giving them a gun and pointing at myself. I think what a lot of us have in common when trying to talk to our parents about mental health is that, like I said, there's so much ignorance and this just lack of education about what mental health issues are, the fact that they're real, the fact that there are a lot of treatable solutions for them. All that information that we as a young generation have had exposure to thanks to like social media or our education, like formal education systems are now teaching, they just did not have like collectively as an entire generation. So I guess when you pair that lack of education and lack of knowledge with that sense of responsibility that most parents have for their children, that like my child has to be okay, I think when you pair the two, I guess produce this conclusion that like, no, my child is not sick, because they just don't even know what that sickness is, or that it's even okay to have. And in terms of like understanding why that is, I had a conversation with somebody who talked about I had a conversation with several people actually who came to the same conclusion that sometimes parents just don't want to accept that their child is sick because they cannot accept the fact that their child might be in harm, and especially if they do not even know what the harm is. That's so badly put. I'm gonna rephrase that. Some parents might not be able to accept the fact that their child is sick, and let alone a sickness that they don't understand. And yeah, like I think when we begin to see why parents specifically have become the way they are, it's a little easier to understand the positions that they've taken. Not that it makes it any easier to deal with, because at the end of the day, we're all people with needs, and some of those needs come from our parents understanding us. But as someone was sharing with me, when you begin to accept that our parents are humans and, you know, imperfect, and not these superhuman beings that know exactly what to do every time something's wrong with you, you know, the way you may be brought up to believe, once you accept that imperfection, things start to get a little easier. Like, it might seem counterintuitive that you as the child might have to take on a parental role, in the sense that you have to then be the grown-up and teach them things that they don't know. But I think that's just kind of an inevitable fact with mental health. they literally do not know things that we do. Someone said they talk about their mental health from like a third person point of view, and I think that's definitely what I try to do. So I've tried to approach it like, oh hey, let's listen to this podcast together, or like, hey guys, you wanna watch this really interesting video, or like I'm sending them like an article. So like I don't really get too personal about myself or my struggles, or like if I have any needs that aren't being met with my family. Specifically with parents, that's a lot harder to do. But with siblings, like I agree that with siblings it can be a lot easier. But even then, like it's so difficult to kind of tell the people who are maybe like the closest people in your life, be like, hey, I'm doing really, really bad and I need your help. It's difficult asking a group of people who don't even know how to help you for help. And it's just a lot of like, I don't know, everything just gets kind of twisted, and then their expectations that, you know, because they're your family, they're supposed to love and unconditionally accept you. And while that's true, that doesn't mean they have the perfect solution or even a good solution for your problems, or even a good idea of how to support you through this time. And it's just, when you're already struggling with a mental health issue and trying to educate somebody on that, on top of all those problems, like that is a real struggle. Yeah, a lot of people were also talking about how like just non-existent these conversations are with their family, and I think like it's hard because you on one hand need to accept that, you know, they're a generation completely unequipped to deal with this, but on the other hand, they're in our lives and our families aren't going anywhere anytime soon, and neither are our mental health issues if, you know, we are continuously treated like not greatly. I'm trying to be respectful. This video is not going to talk about solutions necessarily for that, although I did consider talking about the different kinds of things you can do for your mental health that I've learned from, you know, my counseling course and from taking a class in university on it. So I might do that next time. Comment down below if that's what you would like to see. You know, like the various kinds of therapies, the various kinds of like self-help you can do. I thought to make like a really informative video based on that. Otherwise, I don't have much of a conclusion on the whole generational gap between our parents and us, or even maybe between our siblings and us. But I do know that mental health, unfortunately, it's just something that's always going to be our responsibility, and we do have a choice on how we look at it and how we understand the people in our lives who we may or may not expect to support us. Yeah, this video didn't really have much of a conclusion. I just thought that we should talk about this problem a lot more, because the quality of relationships in your life significantly impacts the quality of your mental well-being. So it's really important that we start to look at these issues and just talk about it more. So if you have any more experiences you'd like to share in the comments, or you can DM me, that'd be really great. Maybe we can get a community going. But anyway, I still have no outro, but thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I know my video styles tend to be a bit rambly, but I was thinking of trying for a more like structured approach for my next one, which hopefully we'll be talking about fast fashion and the effects of that on everyday life. Okay, thanks guys, bye!